I'd like to introduce David Giambruno. Thanks, Lee. Now I got to live up to that. That's awesome. So I live through sarcasm, right? So I make points, I do things, really to teach people how to do things and how to think. And so when you look at this, right, you know, Flinestones to the Jetsons, that's basically my theme in life, is going from dumb to smart. Execution, getting rid of werewolves, understanding that there's no unicorns and everything's just really hard work using really smart people. Where's the clicker? Clicker. Oh, there we go. So this is the first time in 25 years I'm not part of a C-suite. So I get to say everything I've thought of saying without a PR firm telling me what I can't say. Just as a disclaimer, I was a drill sergeant in the Army. Anybody here seen Animal House? Right? I was Blutarsky. I joined the Army because I had an epiphany that I was probably going to kill myself through some really fun process. But I did join the Army, became a drill sergeant. And you know, I live by isms, so you know, I'm kind of like flossing with a chainsaw. I will say things that will make you feel uncomfortable, but everything I've done has been published. So this is all no joke, validated. There's some article out there on this. And it's really about sharing an idea, because I think the most important thing a human can do is share an idea. This is my narcissism slide, all right? And so I've had awesome teams around me. And so my best job is actually letting smart people do what they do. Right? I've won all these crazy awards, lots of recognition, and I just joke I'm like the front guy, right? Because I can't do all this. But what it has done is showing what's possible, right? So we're at Capital One, right? I was the CIO of Revlon. I made lipstick, just so we're clear, right? I've been in businesses where I've had lots of compliance and little. So when I'm not in a highly compliant world, I do crazy stuff because I want to see what's possible, all right? And that's what a lot of this story is. And there's really three parts. It's the transformations I've done to show you what's possible, the DevOps journeys I've done, because I've been doing DevOps before it had a name. I'm doing big data before it had a name. I'm just glad it all has a name now, because then I don't feel crazy. But it's about showing the possible and how you use the word can't, right? So I'm like, yeah, why can't you, right? Where a lot of people are like, well, I can't. I figure out the other equation, and it does get me into trouble. By the way, if you haven't read my shirt, it says CIO, career's over, okay? And on the back, there's a target. My team got this for me because A, they thought it was funny, and B, I would actually wear it to budget meetings. So basically, my job is to enable the businesses to turn around and face forward, right? That's what I've always kind of preached. You know, it's make systems work for people and not people work for systems, all right? And that's what a lot of you in this room do. And developers do something that's really kind of funny and ironic to me, is developers think like a computer so a human can interact with a computer. It's funny and brilliant and sad all at the same time. I provide management teams with actionable information and good decision. Any moron can manage good news. My job is to get the bad news out so we can move forward. And I believe in working like a family, which means you can have a fight, you give a hug after. You figure out how to move forward, right? And there are some people who just fail, and they shouldn't be in their job, and that's the reality of management. That's why it's management. This is probably one of, I expect my teams to make IT better, do it faster, cheaper, smarter, and more secure. I deliver an iPad view of the world, right? Because that's what everybody wants now. They just want to be able to use it. They don't really care how it works, right? And you got to add features and functionality, consistent improvement, trust but verify, right? It's always, always my thing. Show what you're doing, prove what you're doing so you can add value. This is probably one of the most important things I live by, right? You can do everything else you can do, but it's essentially how you make people feel, which is the irony, because we work in zeros and ones, right? But the people we work with, the teams you work with, the business teams, everybody remembers how you feel. How do you make them feel? Do they feel good? Do they feel like you're doing something? It's ironic, but this is true, right? And this is one of these things I live by, which is How am I making my teams feel? How am I making my management teams feel? How do I make my customers feel, right? This is the other thing I was a high potential when I was at Pitney Bowes, which I always thought was funny. But I had a PhD from Harvard, and she taught me something incredibly important, which is help me transform. And transform teams, myself, which is people are meaning-making machines. People only understand their frame of reference and where they are and what they do. You have to take them on a journey, right? And in order to do that, you have to show them what's possible. You have to make them not be afraid. And how do you make them feel? And you'll see some technology in here. Technology to me is like ice cream. You want vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry, what works for your org, what works, whatever, right? Who cares? But it's about the people, right? People are hard. If you're going to move people, you have early adopters, people who are naturally curious. By the way, that's what I look for, the number one thing in people. I could care less about your technical chops, as long as you can do your job. But if you're curious, that is the number one aspect, because shit is going to change, right? Anybody here think they're going to be doing this, programming the same language in the next 5 years? Right. You're not. So how do you deal, right? You need curious people to do the pieces, right? And again, the most important thing is to change. You have to make people feel safe. So one of the things that I absolutely believe in is speed is today's competitive advantage. No matter what a business is going to do, whether it's going to acquire or grow organically, it's all about speed, right? And you're in DevOps. It's about speed, right? How fast can you do this, right? I'll say speed and precision, right? But if you're going to be organic, you got to take market share, right? You got to innovate. If you're going to do acquisitions, you got to have integration and optimization. And around that, sometimes you have to be an evil overlord with a hug. This is the other T-shirt I was thinking of wearing, right? But you have to have intolerance to not tolerate mediocrity. You cannot afford it if you're going to be in DevOps, right? You have to deliver, and especially as you go digital transformations, everything increases. You end up with what I call mass and splash problems, which is you have a small project that has massive effect. If you screw that up, A, CIO career's over, but B, you end up problems in your teams, right? And it's really about building greatness. Fundamental architecture design principles, right? I've lived this forever. If you can't automate it, you don't need it. This was actually the sign of my head of engineering, right? That was every conversation, everything we did, ever. And then there's the balance between building and buying, right? Because you're an engineer, should you build it, right? So every step forward has to be measured against speed, not the effort to move forward. And so, I use open source, COTS. Don't build snowflakes, okay? Snowflakes roll downhill, and snowflakes become snowballs, and snowballs become rocks over time, right? And so affecting your speed, because you should build it, or because you can, should you, right? What are those things you can buy that give you speed, right? To me, I think that's one of the questions that people have to be in, right? And I've been in meetings where people are talking about building a hypervisor. Really? Seriously? Like, come on, don't do that. So outcomes, right? So trust but verify, great, I'm up here talking. My big shtick is always going from the Flinestones to the Jetsons, right? How do we do this? And it never ends, right? My big rules are enable cultures of try, use technology to show what's possible, right? One of the biggest challenges we have that job you can't explain to your mom, right? I'm sorry, most business people do not understand what they do. They don't understand the effort. But what you can do is show them. And one of the biggest things you have to do is give back time. And that's why I go to automation. If you don't want to drive your teams crazy, if you don't want to keep asking for headcount every 5 minutes, you have to automate. DevOps is a process of automation where you take creativity, you automate it, you push it to the back so you can take more on and do more. If you do not do that, you will die. Right? Disconnect the time and effort to do things. Outcome is platforms for innovations. Move resources from operations support to revenue producing. And by the way, if anybody wants to heckle or question along the way, I'm good with that, just so we're clear. So proven outcomes, right? My first transformation, I gave back 70 million bucks. My second one, I gave back 120 million bucks. Faster, cheaper, better. Collapsed 21 ERPs into one. Delivered global view of customer data. Got the infrastructure out of the way. Moved all but 5 servers to the cloud. 100% uptime for 3 years. Cyber and compliance. I could patch every server in the world in under 17 minutes. I made lipstick at the time, okay? The second one, I transformed in 18 months, Flintstones Jetson, created a frictionless enterprise, replaced applications, built new enterprise data models, collapsed 54 data centers into one, actually onto 7 racks. It was pretty funny. Security, compliance, BCP, total, literally ground up. First one was Revlon. I moved 531 applications to the cloud. Automated 15,000 application moves a month. That meant moving applications around the world, and this is a long time ago. 14,000 transactions a second, and reduced data center power by 72%. This is doing Agile a long time ago, right? So what's the impact of doing all this? So project throughput up 425% from inception, less than 1% project failure, and I gave back 70 million bucks using Agile, using DevOps. Before it was Agile and DevOps. But this is the outcome. And by the way, Revlon was going out of business, and in this time frame, became the most profitable cosmetics company in the world. And by the way, what do you do when you run 100% uptime? You pimp your data center. So this is one of my favorite stories ever, right? So there's a piece I left out of here, is the CEO was visiting, right? And 75% of everything made in Revlon is made in Raleigh, North Carolina. Go figure, 2 million square feet of manufacturing. And so I pimped the data center after giving back 70 million bucks, because I figure if I spent a couple grand, no one's gonna get too mad at me. But he did do something else. So I'm like, hey, Alan, are you in a good mood today? He's like, yeah. I'm just like, okay, you can't fire me for the next half hour. And he's like, do I have to get legal involved? I'm like, no, I'm just making sure you're in a good mood. So I walk him into the data center, and he sees this. He's like, oh my God, that is awesome. That is epic. And we talked for a minute. He's like, hey, let's go talk to everybody in the, he's a real social CEO, great guy. He goes, let's go talk to all the data centers. So he's walking out of the data center, comes to a dead stop. He goes, how much were the lights? 10 grand? Nah. How much was the door? I'm like, Alan. He steps back, steps forward. He goes, no, really. How much was the door? And he steps back, steps forward. He goes, you built Star Trek doors. I'm like, yeah. He goes, how much? I'm like, 40 grand. He's like, 40 grand for doors? I'm like, dude, I built Star Trek doors. I had to fly a guy in to do the sound engineering, okay? Because these were the 1960 Star Trek doors. They went psk, psk, really fast. Exactly. It was awesome. And he's like, who signed for that? I'm like, you did. It was the line item. He was like, oh my God. He goes, good thing you gave back money and you told me I couldn't fire you for 30 minutes. But he's like, these are awesome, because he's going back and forth, right? It was great. One of those just great moments. But the irony of doing that whole stupid thing was we had no downtime for years. Because if you wanted to mess with our data center or anything, everybody was so protective. When the business people brought people to the factory, it was the first place they brought them. When the governor of North Carolina came to visit the plant, first place they got them. So the esprit de corps, and this is only an example, and everything's moving to cloud, but finding these examples for esprit de corps, because to me, it was the most unintended consequence I've ever had, right? Because people took pride. And when you give people purpose and pride, it is amazing what they can do. The 425% increase, it wasn't me doing it. It was teams figuring out how to consistently do it better. I stopped managing. I know I'm successful when I don't have to tell my team what to do. They're telling me to get stuff out of their way, right? Especially with my personality. They're like, can you get them out? I'm like, sure, let's go. Bring out the inner drill sergeant, we're good. My second transformation was I split a $4 billion company into 2 pieces. I ran $2 billion on 7 racks. My joke with this picture is it's not pretty, it still needs lipstick, because that's the Revlon joke, right? But literally $2 billion of revenue on 7 racks with cloud and the whole 9 yards, right? So again, It's about what's possible. Again, the second transformation, project throughput up 280% with 1/10 the people. So when I split the company, everybody thought I was crazy. About 15 people out of 800 came with me, okay? Because they're like, oh my God, he's gonna make me work. All right? So when we rebuilt, I took the opportunity to re-platform a multi-billion-dollar company and automate all of it. And we did it. And we did it in 6 months. I mean, it sucked, but the outcome was awesome. And so the whole joke with that, though, is I totally pulled a Kobayashi Maru. So I gave away all infrastructure, apps, everything. Total greenfield, right? So how could God build the world in 7 days? No legacy infrastructure. That's one of the best quotes ever, right? But it's about what's possible. And part of the lesson is, if you ever get the opportunity, give it all away and start over. It's way faster and easier, okay? Just letting you know. And when you think about what we did, in 18 months, we had 80 system go live, 0 misses using Agile and DevOps. We literally rebuilt an entire enterprise with 0 defects. Well, it wasn't me. There were lots of people who were crying. I have another t-shirt that has basically hashtag on effers. No matter how bad it's screwed up, we'll fix it, right? I used to do HR nightmare, right? So I had them all printed up, and when someone would do awesome getting this stuff done, I would come in like 5 in the morning, I'd wrap it in a brown paper bag, write great job, love you, leave it on their desk so I had plausible deniability. Okay? But again, it's finding those esprit de corps things, right? And I'm always willing to get fired, right? So finding those things, even if it's not totally the most appropriate thing in the world, right? But finding those things that can affect your team to get the outcomes to make them feel like they have ownership and show them what's possible.
How did you go about the people's skills transformation? Were you forceful in that area? Or?
I'm never forceful. No, I'm not. I'm demanding, right? And again, so between curiosity, intelligence, and sheer effing determination, those are the qualities I look for. And again, in a way, I cheated, right? Because only the people who were crazy came with me, right? Because people are like, wow, you're going to make me work too hard. So I love what I do. I love to work. I have an engine that does not stop, right? And so, again, I put people around me that either compliment me or live like that. So I always have like a 6 Sigma person around me to measure stuff because I'm a bulldozer and I know it, right? But it's finding those teams, right? And the people that want to do things. The other thing is, as you show success, like as we were doing this, when we started racking up, like boom, boom, things were executing. When people believe, I don't have to do much work anymore. What you need is the catalyst to show what's possible, and that's not, I'm not going to fire you for making a mistake. Like I have some simple rules, like any moron can manage good news, right? If you've got a problem or you blow something up, 2 simple rules. Let me know as soon as possible, and if we don't like somebody, find them to blame. That's a joke, right? But the only one I really is like if you show up on the 1-yard line and tell me we have a problem, or at 11:59 I go line at 12, you're going to get the evil overlord, okay? Because I'm intolerant. Like if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, right? Because a lot of things when you do this stuff is you go from I think to I know, right? And making people feel safe to have the curiosity and learn. When you're using brand new technology, no one's ever done it before. There's no one you can call, right? I've had great conversations with, CTOs like, hey, here's what we did. It's not supposed to do that. No kidding. We bent it. Can you help us bend it back? But give me those people all day long, right? So again, I collapsed 54 data centers into 2. Automated all DR. It was awesome. I virtualized everything, moved it. It was literally just awesome. This is kind of model that I did. I had the enterprise, BI, big data, master data, private cloud, and I could integrate anything, right? But these are sets of architectures, especially when you're large multi-billion-dollar companies. The idea is absorb, adapt, and then even eject things, but eject things with their data in concert with a certain amount of structure, right? And again, this kind of goes back to what I was talking to earlier. People spend more time figuring out how not to do something than actually doing it. This is one of my biggest beefs, right? I'll sit in meetings and people will talk for an hour how not to do it, and I'm just like, I start to lose I vibrate, right? I'm like, can somebody just talk about how to fix this? Because if it doesn't violate the laws of physics, it can be done, okay? And I design, execution environments and use the technology to deliver capability, opportunity, and cost reductions, right? And I don't do blame, ever. I never look back. I mean, there's certain things, like I've done a walk of shame. I smoked 45,000 servers once. That was a walk of shame. I know now what to do, right? But I learned from it, and that's why I'm very cautious about automation and AI, right? So, you have simple problems in automation where it's like a hand grenade going off, and then you have global thermonuclear destruction. I did the global thermonuclear destruction piece. By the way, never realized how important time is on servers. Truth, who wants to change? I think everybody's seen this, who wants to change, right? This is one of my funniest slides, Simon, CIO career's over, right? Figuring out how not to do stuff, right? We're in a world of DevOps. You guys are on the leading edge, but this is part of the battleship you have to address, right? And then context, the real world, right? So forward looking, we're in the largest bull market in history, right? At some point it ends. And when it ends, it's gonna be the year 2000 again, right? Where, I was talking, you got paid $100 an hour and then now it's $30 an hour, right? Public companies are measured on EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, okay? Expense is bad, capital is good. You're starting to see this swing with CFOs now because the amount of expense, this SaaS stuff, is going so high and so fast that they're starting to freak out because it's killing EBIT and their numbers. It's coming. Cyber regulations is coming. It's going to be the new SOX, right? As the world moves to cloud and code, hackers are attacking code and apps. I'm seeing this now. They're stopping to attack infrastructure and they're attacking your code. It's coming. It's going to get worse. Right? And cyber will become more physical. I can't wait to ransom someone's house to them when they're trying to get, in their house. I'm going to be like, hey, $100 to get in your house. It's coming, watch. Right, so operational VANA, increased capability and speed, flexibility, data is a competitive advantage, and increased security. This is what the businesses are asking for you. For large enterprises, this is the enterprise under the covers. Anything that's older than 20 years old, this is my spaghetti chart. This is 3.8% of interfaces mapped. Right? This is eating an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? Get a really large, glass of water, knife and a fork, some salt, pepper, and start chewing. Because this is the only way. There is no magic bullet. This is just hard work. Right? To make matters worse, the ball's moved. Digital transformation. Right? I spent a lot of time in big data doing all kinds of fun stuff, doing transformations. And I remind that most companies can't even handle their internal data, and you're going to go add 100 times the data flow. What do you do with it? Who's building microservices? All right, so if you're building microservices, the first thing you have to build is a data model, not the customer model, or you build micro monoliths. Trust me, watch what happens. So my course philosophy is progressive refinement. I define what's in the middle of the triangle. I look at app portfolios, my infrastructure, and people, product, and operating capabilities. And what you do is you make that smaller over time, right? This is the process I essentially used and built is my agile. Consistency, same set of skills, super fast execution and automation. It's how you take time out. Right? And what you see now is really the traditional teams, right? The old CIO teams, right? And it's the transformation to DevSecOps teams. So when you'll see me, everybody talks CIDC, right? CI/CD. I call CI/CD/CS for continuous security. Okay? That has to start being in people's lexicons. As the world moves to code, it's going to get really interesting. So why DevOps? Right? So I believe in a couple overlying principles. You've kind of heard them, people talk about it. I've said for years, I believe in indiscriminate computing, my ability to move my code, my compute, my services wherever and however I want it based on an economic or performance model. Right? Entropy, avoid and stay first, right? Closed system dies. Fail fast and fail cheap, right? The ability for an enterprise to be experimental without being, essentially spanked. And it's all about customers, right? Moving closer to them. Scale, contract, move on demand, all that automation. And enable the developer and product teams by getting the infrastructure out of the way, reducing friction, disconnect the time it takes to go from thought to product, right? And outcomes are always at the core. Oops, this is a dupe. Oh, no, that's not. Oh. So this is one of the things I did. I did a huge cloud transformation, right? Literally all data centers, zero cloud, big company, you would know them, right? In 5 months, went from 0 to 40 of the largest apps out in AWS, fully containerized, Kubernetes, the whole 9 yards, fully transparent, zero operational impact, API-driven infrastructure. And to me, this is where the world's going, and at the scale and capability that it has to happen and at the speed, right? So transformation first steps, right, is really classify and factor, right? So your application portfolio for any enterprise is your physics problem, okay? And so I kind of joke, understand what you can, what's easy, medium, hard, gonna suck. It's better off to shoot it and it's never going away, right? Because those are the set of constraints you have to deal with. And so I believe in winding teams up, do the easy stuff, learn on it. It's not risky, right? And take on, till you get to the stuff which is better off shoot it and have that conversation, and then you can start addressing the stuff that no one thinks you could go away at the beginning. By the middle to the later part, you can start having the conversations of, no, we can actually make that go away, and we'll not screw up the business, and we can deliver on it, because you're building essentially trust and confidence through this process, right? And then what are the factors considered, right? Stateless or data-driven, public or internal, operational overhead, resource intensive. There's kind of what I call West Coast view of the world, right? Which is, everything's, there's tons of mainframes. There's tons of AS400s. There's tons of Unix boxes that run huge chunks of companies, right? There is work for the next 50 years, literally. And don't be CIO'd because somebody read it in a blog, and cloud and containers are not a silver bullet, right? They don't solve every problem. Again, it's, get the right tool for the right job. APIs will define how your teams interact with one another. This is actually really interesting, right? So APIs are not just for computers. They define how your teams work with one another, their behavior, their responsibility, their workflows. Right? It's like infrastructure. The Terraform API defines consistent infrastructure as well, defining how teams work, right? So request infrastructure resources. And Terraform is the backbone. Again, it's just one technology. That's a good example. Conway's Law, right? So organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures within their organizations. It's really fascinating to watch software teams literally follow this. And so some of the times you have to hold up a mirror and understand, are you being self-limiting? Are you self-determining everything already, right? And kind of step out of that. And that's the time that it's hard. It's when the management team has to make people safe and understand that you can take a hard look at yourself, right? Are we telling ourselves that we're going right all the time, right? It's like being a NASCAR race car. It only turns left. Well, if you're doing that, then something's wrong, right? New contracts are created. And this, to me, was one of the biggest pieces as you go through the journey, right? And so you're going to have the DevOps groups of the world, and then you're going to almost always have the old guard. You have to bring those pieces together, and I talk about that a little more, right? But developers getting a single interface to deploy code and don't think about infrastructure. That's my goal for all my dev teams, right? You shouldn't care. Everything runs through an API, it's transparent, and the rest manage itself in the background. Right? Developers are focused on getting applications. Again, I just use some of the technology. I don't care what you use, right? So developers focus on applications running on Kubernetes and Docker, for an example. Infrastructure is abstracted. Infrastructure does not have to think about the individual team anymore, right? Infrastructure provides abstracted compute resources. The infrastructure has one job, keep Kubernetes running. And then if you make Kubernetes run faster, everything runs faster. Right? So again, it's kind of this repetitive. And the contract is, if you do this, we'll run it. So infrastructure to developers, tell the CI team to build a Docker container and we'll run it. CI system to developers, tell me what build test and I will do it. Infrastructure to CI team, tell me when the build is ready and I will run it, right? And it kind of leads this, and again, this is a personal belief that getting the infrastructure out of the way for the entire company is one of the most powerful things you can do, right? So an API-driven infrastructure appears as a service to developers, right? Single process to deploy both services and applications. And the infrastructure to any cloud, private, or data center, I don't care, right? You'll have multiple pipelines, but over time you'll get to one. But this is absolutely possible. So there's no silver bullet, right? So I joke with people like, please, there's, werewolves, silver bullets, just stop, right? You have to design for failure, plan for change, automate all your processes, build capabilities, not tools, right? And adopt best practices where you can. So when you bring someone else in, it's not like some voodoo where you have these crazy run books and they have to like figure stuff out and it's like, person learning to read Braille. And then automate it, templatize everything, orchestrate both the infrastructure and your containers. Think of handling secret configurations like passwords. Backup restore is still a thing in the cloud. No matter how ephemeral you think it is, it's not, right? And if you do your good job, you also enable DR. So CIDCS, right? Everything is code. And this is the big change. The world is just moving to code. You're in a great place at a great time. The world understands this, right? Don't screw it up, just saying. Everything needs to go through a CDI process, even the infrastructure code, right? This is rinse and repeat, just do over, right? Identify steps that takes too long, automate. Just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And this should never stop, right? This is what your DevOps team should be focused on, right? I added the CS, right, to continually scan your code. It's one of the biggest problems I see, right? And so migrate applications from existing brick and mortar to next-gen virtualized, right? The outcome application service can be moved between data centers. This happens in several steps. Do not recommend lift and shift, okay? Don't do that. Don't lift and shift your apps. I have a friend who called and he's like, my AWS bill went from $5 million to $40 million. Like, oh my God, right? Connect first, build new pipelines, run the numbers, run the tech, right? Increase capability or reducing risk both operationally and security, right? The first thing I tell people when they're going to the cloud, learn how to manage cost first, right? You've seen AWS and everybody else stop the work cost savings because too many CIOs who said they would save 70% got fired. It's not cheaper. It's way faster, and that's why you're seeing kind of the agile pitch, right? Next-gen workflow and pipelines. Again, you guys can read this, but again, it's creating new pipelines. And there is no technology out there right now, or let's say, there's nothing in technology that you can't do this with, right? The biggest problem is people, especially, no offense, the legacy infrastructure guys, not wanting to understand and live this. And what I tell them is the train's coming. It actually left the station, and if you don't hear a train coming and it hits you, does it still hurt? The answer is yes. Right? Deploy anywhere, right? Application owners only need to create objects for new systems, right? Kubernetes, VMware, packet manifest, Docker, regardless of source destination, right? Implementation will be the same. I've done this. It works. Again, the hardest thing is people's mindsets, right? So moving parts, public cloud, internal cloud, right? Running this concurrently reduces operations, minimizes investment. So what I always do is make the ability to move back and forth, do the float. Right? Those architectures and capabilities exist. Here's an example of one of them that I've built, right? So I basically joke it's a data center in a box, but I can connect everything in that data center out to Amazon through Kubernetes, who cares? Totally doable, done it. It brings the two worlds together and starts the old and the new thinking in the same way. If this is the one thing you do, go give those infra guys a hug, because they're going to need it. Right, to learn this. It's hard, right, because you're taking their meaning, their view of the world, and you're going to change it. It's easy for you, it's hard for them. You actually need to help them, because some of that stuff isn't going away for years, and the more you do this with them, the easier it'll be. Right? Kind of another view, right? Photon is pretty good. You've seen a lot of stuff with AWS and VMware's everywhere in corporate America, right? There is the path to do the go-between, right? I just took an example of the 800-pound gorilla, and I built this. So here's my views on cybersecurity. Probably going to make some people angry. My golden rule of cybersecurity: you are less secure today than you are tomorrow. No matter what code you build today, somebody found a problem with it, and now it's a vulnerability. There's more patches, there's more everything. All right? So don't fool yourself. And if you don't fix this, you're going to kill the world. Right? So bad things happen. By the way, I say this, I don't write it, I've never been breached. Right? So I'm 1-in-1 bottle rocket versus the factory. Right? So that's a kid launching a bottle rocket into a factory in Venezuela and my factory exploding. And I moved that factory in an hour and 20 minutes and put everybody back to work the next day. I'm 27-0 against crypto locker ransomware. Right? I have a standard email, which is basically my middle finger. Would you try to go 2 out of 3? So how many people would put their security teams up against that, setting the hacker back? No one? So you all suck that bad. No, I'm not. I mean, I know it's harsh, but that's to me in cyber, it's the self-defeating purpose. We're going to get hacked. I don't buy that. Could you try? Right? Being self-defeating is the worst thing I see in cyber today. It drives me insane. Because you can defeat it. Right? I'm 1-0 against a hacking organization, 1-0 against state-sponsored. I've sent out 13 million patches in a day, and I only smoked 1 laptop. That was a divisional president. I brought her a new laptop at lunch, gave her a hug. We were all good. Right? I could 17 minutes mean time to patch. It's all possible, right? All had 0 business impact, all have white papers. But people are figuring out how not to do it in cyber. And it's game on, right? So basic cyber rules for you guys: deploy a WAF, and a real one. No offense to Amazon, but that's like kiddie scripts, okay? Signal Science, a couple other ones. Continuously scan your code, right? Scan your applications and back your stuff up, right? It's not ephemeral as you think, right? Connect what the hackers are attacking to your code you are writing. You have to understand what code they're attacking from the outside to the inside. If you're not doing that, you're just asking for a kicking, all right? If you think cultural appropriation is a crime, right? One of the biggest things I see is people copying code, copying libraries, and not understanding what they're doing. And I see it repeatedly, right? So I see vulnerabilities go down, I help organizations, and I see it go right back up. I'm like, where is it coming from? Oh, they're copying code. It's just coming in. Every time they do a refresh, thoop. Really? Why don't you just put a gun to your head? So hackers. I get asked by boards all this time. Fundamentally, hackers don't pay for data centers. They use your shit. It's really simple, right? They use your infrastructure to host stuff, hold your files for ransom, get paid for it, use your hardware to mine crypto, right? Even but it's going down, so it's not so much anymore. They sell your information, and they're watching you respond in chaos, right? It's because you have a computer, right? Utterances that deserved a slap, right? I've actually had people say this to me. If I don't know about it, I'm not responsible for it. That was awesome from a CISO, right? We outsource security, so we're not responsible, right? Why do I need to understand my inventory, right? We don't scan or patch because it's too hard, right? We don't use usernames or passwords. That was awesome, right? Checking out your code for vulnerabilities isn't necessary. I don't know how to fix that code. I just copied it, right? If we got too many alerts, we just turned it off. It's awesome, right? You can be compliant but not secure, right? I love explaining this to auditors. We just passed PCI. You just got hacked. Really? Come on. This is me. Like another one of my little theater moments. I try to explain to legal how many new vulnerabilities came in every month. So I printed out all 50,000 pages of vulnerabilities that came in a month. This is real, right? When you guys understand from a CISO, from a CIO level, how many things are coming at your organization. And remember, hackers have done something which you haven't done. They've digitized. They scale. They know how to go after your organization in a totally mechanized way, and you don't understand what they're doing, okay? But 50,000 pages, that was fun. I actually mailed that to them and had them review it. Didn't go over well, but for me it did. Right, so I had lack of reasonable RAM rules. I have these conversations all the time. You have 1 million critical vulnerabilities, and they will argue that that's not bad. Your windows and doors are open. Like, how can you not? Right, so everybody know who Jeff Foxworthy is? Right, so say this in the best Jeff Foxworthy way. So, by the way, I bet $500. I'm sitting with a CIO and a CISO on my laptop, put like $500, your security sucks. They're like, no. I'm like, dude, put your money where your mouth is. You know, $500, let's go have a really, really, really nice lunch on you. And they're like, no, no, no. So in 5 minutes, right, this is what I got. I was just on their public wireless, which I jumped into their corporation, right, and then just scanning for blank and default passwords. So if you leave your default password enabled on your firewall, you might get hacked, right? If you leave your remote access and default passwords on your ERP platform, you might get hacked, right? If you leave default access to your database, you might get hacked. That's how easy it is today. Check your stuff, right? If you're on the internet and you're measuring your web vulnerabilities, right, the slope will never change, right? So get a WAF for now. These are all vulnerabilities. I sanitized it, but that's a real life. That's insane, right? This deserves a Darwin Award, but is sadly very common, right? Default or blank passwords. Thousands. How are you going to keep a hacker out? And by the way, I pull it out of code all the time. Please don't put your usernames and passwords in code, okay? Right? Know what's attacking your code, right? Cite all your sites, what type of attacks, how they're attacking. Really good WAF today will tell you what code they're going after and look at it and understand why they're going after it. They're going after it because they can get it. You may not understand, get help. But understand why they're attacking your code. Right? Please, God, help, right? I mean, if you have an externally facing server, please turn off directory, right? So every once in a while, me and my friends, we kind of do Google searches. We got the private keys for huge organizations, and then we tried helping them. And the amount of outdumbing I got, so outdumbing is when people ask you such stupid questions, you quit, right? I'm like, literally, you have, right? You have your keys exposed, turn off directory, right? And you know, all except one took days for anyone to respond. And then I told them they had to do their, you need to rotate your keys. Oh, that's too hard. So what to do? This is one slide for security. Bubble wrap everything, right? You will hurt yourself. Just bubble wrap it, okay? Bubble wrap your enterprise, your apps, your code, your services, your data, and your team members. Just don't allow them to hurt themselves. You can't train people fast enough to know how they're being attacked, right? Close the windows and doors, right? Remove blanket default passwords. So anybody here know how many vulnerabilities you have in your code right now? Right. How many else? Not many. Really? If you can't answer that question in your code, you have a problem. You're just asking for it. You're contributing to the problem. I'm sorry. Like, it's just the facts. Right? Web API code, please deploy your WAF, continually scan your apps, right? Connect what the hackers are attacking to your code. I'm going to say this over. Right? Fun facts. There is no hack in the last 2 years that is from anything that is unknown. No 0 days. The NSA has said everything is known. These are all known vulnerabilities. No one's doing voodoo because it's too easy to get in. Right? Warren Buffett is more worried about cybersecurity than he is global thermonuclear war, because you can now delete an entire company. So this is, by the way, this is my only pitch. So I got so mad at how expensive scanning was that I built my own. I'm basically giving it away, right? In 10 minutes, just please scan your code. If you really want it, I'll give it to you for free. for the simple fact that it costs too much to scan, it's crazy, and people don't do it. Anyway, thanks. 20 seconds left. Any questions after, let me know. Shoot.
All right, so one of the things that frustrates me is we hear about how everybody's holding everybody ransom, but you know what we never hear about is somebody getting prosecuted for holding somebody ransom. Why is there not an enforcement side of this cybersecurity thing?
So the problem is finding them.
Right.
Can't catch them.
I mean, are we in the wrong business?
So there's a thing about cyber, right? And I'm going back to DC on Wednesday because I have a whole speech around cybersecurity through blunt force trauma, and I'm the blunt force trauma, right? Because I have a really harsh version of this that I give to people, right? And cyber is becoming pharmaceutical, where the treatment is way more profitable than the cure. And that's the problem. Look at the investments in cyber. No one wants to solve the problem. They want to keep it going, where it's eminently solvable. And that's the frustration.
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
Yeah. And so it's kind of mutually assured destruction, right? It's a continual ram up.
Right.
Although I will push back, the one thing I tell every organization, like if I walk in, I'll say, take the CISO and his team, and be like, how many vulnerabilities do you have? How many patches? How many blank default passwords? And they look at me, 99%, we don't know. I'm like, get out of the room. Like, you don't need to talk to me, you need to fix that shit. Because if you don't know that, and that's the problem, the simple basics are not done. Do the basics. It's not that hard and it's not that expensive. And most of them don't want, because I get called in by generally boards or CEOs, right? And everybody's worried about the conversation after, which is, what have you been spending my money on? And there's a project I'm working on to provide a score for cybersecurity that a board or a CEO, how are we doing? Basically mathematical version of NIST, taking all the data sources within a company and providing a score. Because you can go to any company and no board has the same information. You can go to board of directors or CEO and go, how are we doing in security? I don't know, right? But the get out of jail card free is, oh, you're gonna get hacked. I was in the Army, I just can't swallow that one, right? If that's your attitude, get out, right? You're better off not spending any money if you're just gonna show up and try.
Yeah, I hate that it's completely frictionless for the hacker at this point.
Well, no one's making it hard for a hacker.
Right.
Again, if you don't have default passwords open, if you don't have vulnerabilities,
That's fair.
close your windows and doors.
Yes.
I've been in one organization in a year that had their shit together, that could answer questions. Fix it. Just do the basics. It's harsh, but again, I use services can you just please keep my stuff safe? Because the world's going digital. If we don't solve it now, it only gets bigger and more complex.
I agree with you.
Right? Any other questions? Heckling? Come on, nothing? Shoot.
So you had a slide that had two bullets on it. Don't get CIO'd or CPO'd, and
Yeah.
it's not as silver, containers and
Yeah.
DevOps doesn't solve your problems. So one of the challenges we have is that we're essentially being, CIO'd.
Yeah.
Whatever the reference.
Yeah, it was on a plane, he read something, and then, yeah.
How do you frame the conversation where, you say, this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. You can't, go pick it up off the shelf and plug it in and magically your challenges are all fixed and we all go happily into the sunset. We have a huge amount of legacy systems and technical debt and we're, acquisitions and mergers and, the challenges are large. And we need to actually take a step back, see the forest for the trees, and make real strategic decisions on how we want to go down that path. How do you get that to resonate?
So, and again, I sit and, there's a caveat for me. I've been the guy on top, and I try not to outdumb my teams, okay? But the way I approach it with leadership teams is the progressive refinement. What's in the triangle, right? Because the way I build it is if you're in the triangle, costs go down, effort goes down, speed goes up, security goes up. And so you kind of, what I would do is I would take my strategy team and figure out what that triangle is today, and in 6-month increments, and then year out to 5 years, because it sounds like you're from a reasonably large organization, right? How do you move that, right? Because then you've got technical changes, organizational changes. I would include the finance team because they're your friend, because as you start making those transformations, it's going to be the question of, I can save money and then I'm investing money, and the art is to make it at least cash flow neutral, right? But getting finance involved and going through that process so everybody agrees. And then there's the silver bullet problem, right? Which is, there's pressure on a CIO. He's got a lot of money, or he or she's got a lot of, big income, and then they're going to try and save their jobs, right? And I've done this, right? So, the thing I think is missing in a lot of places is actually leadership. So, like, I've had budget constraints. I've put a bullet in my own head for my team. Like, fire me, I'm really expensive, I've got a severance, right? And to me, it's indicative that that is missing in most organizations, right? And the ability to let the team do the work, come up with a solution, and then work among teams to figure out how to do this. Most people know what to do. Like, when I join a company, one of the first things I do quietly is I have a Stop Stupid campaign. What are we doing that's really stupid? Because everybody knows, right? Just no one has a vehicle to do it. And then tying that to finance, right? Finance is your friend. In a large company, whoever your controller is, to understand where all the spend is, work with them to create the models and show how the money changes. That will get the CIO's attention, but it also, the CFO will hear about it. And that's when they get interested. Hey, I heard your team's doing, right? And it's getting that conversation, so it's just not the CIO, so you have a larger sphere of influence to work in, right? Because almost everybody will work. Oh, the CFO, who probably the CIO reports to, right, holds his budget or her budget. It's amazing what can happen when they go, because they will start following. So some of it's managing up, but it is, I use the progressive refinement, I use the finance, create the financial models as well as the operational models and show how you transform. Because a lot of companies will say they want to transform, but they literally do not know how. And so if you have the people in the team that know how, or at least want to try, and give them the avenue to show off.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. We have a lot of initiatives that are simultaneously
Yeah.
want to be transformative, but they don't seem to be unified.
So when that happens, I go back to the time problem, right? The only way that you can transform is if you figure ways to automate, to give time back, to give to the teams to actually get stuff done. Right? Otherwise, everybody's the perpetual project management, right? You're recalculating every week because things missed, things didn't happen, right? It becomes you spiral down instead of spiral up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Let's hear it for David.